Hello, Golords, and it's unanimous. Most of you people wanted to add things like habitat modules and whatnot, but most of you said you would like to see a mining base, and someone had the interesting idea of turning this into a spaceship, where we can mine the ore from it and use the fuel to travel around the solar system, which sounds like an excellent idea. But however, as I said, it was unanimous that everybody wanted at least a mining station. At least most of you did. So that is what we're going to create. So let's go to the VAB and start building. Also, note this is in version 1.0.5. The save works. Yeah, I'll have to try my mining the man operation in this version. See if that works as well. Anyway, let's go to the VAB and build the mining rig. Okay, so let's start this build using the Command Pod Mark II. If that's what it's called, it's Command Pod Mark 1-2. Okay. Next, we need a docking port of some kind so we can transfer fuels across, an ore. And now let's build a rocket itself so that we can control it. I'm using the Rockomax X200 fuel tank, and I think we'll use the Poodle engine. It should give us enough delta V and enough oomph to get us there. Alright, now we need some kind of mining rig. Now if we go to the fuel tanks and if we look around, this is the new fuel, the ore tank. Quite small, probably too small for what we require, so what I'll do is I'll use the small holding tank. Set symmetry to 4, and what we want to do is we want to dock this to the asteroid. We can't at the moment because the rocket engine is in the way. So the idea I came up with to overcoming that is to add the claw under them. Right, the claw's here. Rotate it downwards. Attach 4 here to make it nice and stable. And what you should do is arm 1, and that animation is quite fast. I'm not sure if that's a bug, but it used to animate in the correct speed. Hopefully it works at the correct speed in the game. Let me know if you have any different situations with that. Okay, so next thing, we want to make sure we got enough distance on that arm. So we've got the drill. Attach it as far down as possible, and then deploy drill. We want to make sure that head enters the asteroid itself. It looks like it will, and I think the animation sets it to that the asteroid hits this part of the drill. So therefore, we've got that much into the asteroid itself. What I'm going to do is I'm going to click on one which has not been deployed. No. Okay, so that's the furthest we can get that down. So if you have that set up, it's fine. The next thing we need to do actually is make sure that that engine is not too low that it'll hit the asteroid and damage, because we may have to undock this at some point. So let's get this as far down as possible. There seems to be the point. All we have to do now is ensure that it is secure, because it's quite far. It may not have enough strength on it. It may not matter in the game, but what I'm going to do is add a strut to make sure that it is. Okay, that's set. Let's quickly disarm these. Or just disarm one and set one there and they're all disarmed again. Okay, now we need some way of processing the fuel. Now these will extract the ore, these will hold the ore, but we've got no way of setting the ore or converting it to a fuel. So what we've got here, and I believe there's a new one, this is the original one, Convertotron, but it's too large for our ship. So I'm going to use a Convertotron 125. You can see it's a nice size. In fact, what we could do is place it in between here and there, so you can say that the ore is transferred to the spacecraft that is docked and converted at the same time. And in fact, that might look a bit ugly. If you don't like the look of that exposed in deep space, what you can do, use the small fairing here, attach it to the top, And let's build that. And if we can get it. This is a bit too large. Okay, wait till that's yellow. Click. Raise up. Okay, let's see if we can reduce that a bit. There we go. It did work in testing. Let's give it one more go. And close fairing. There you go. That looks a bit better. It looks a bit more professional, as you'd see, you know, and transfer the fuel across. Now, the only thing we need to add now is a few touches. So let's go to utility. Now, the drills, they used to cause a lot of heating. So what I'm going to do is add thermal radiators onto the side of this. And also we may need some power, but we've got large solar panels on the asteroid itself, so we don't need anything more than these panels to make sure we're charged as we're approaching. Okay, that's mostly the rig done, except for RCS. Now we need to translate towards it, and since the rocket is on the bottom of the miner, we need some way of maneuvering towards it. So let's add some tanks. I think some of the radial tanks will be fine for this. We don't need even that large ones. Put them on the center mass. And then the control, we use the RCS thruster blocks. Now make sure it's equal distance from the center. Let's put some up there. And if I'm using my finger on the monitor, let's move these solar panels down a bit. And I'd say that's roughly the same. Okay. And I don't like them close to the RCS. So what I'll do is I'll put some of them on there and on this side as well. That would make sure that you get sun caught on one side of the rocket, or two panels caught in the sun at each time. Okay, that's our mining rig. Now all we need to do is build a launcher. So now this time I'm not going to go through the rendezvous. I may video it and fast forward it through time, but I'm sure that you should have down by now. So let's build a launcher. Decoupler, they're clipping a bit on there, so I'm not sure if you'll have problems with that. If you do, what we can do is, if I find it, we need the girders. There we are. And place that on the side as such. In symmetry 4, it would be best. If you're worried about these RCS tanks, you can always put them on the outside of the struts. Now we can add to the miner again. Make sure struts are attached to that. And always strut these up on one end. Since we attached it to the bottom, let's strut it on the top of the girder. To make sure it doesn't flop about, because it's not attached to the ship on the top until you've actually attached a strut to it. Okay, now that's a bit further out. In fact, let's add a strut to the bottom of the fuel tank. If we zoom in a bit. Onto the ore tank. That way they will not move around a bit, not so much, and it should give a strength to the rocket itself. Okay, now for the launcher. Okay, we got 2,303. That should get us to the asteroid and rendezvous easily enough. All we need now is a rocket to get this into orbit. So if you go to fuel tanks, we've got the decoupler. Now all we need is a nice large rocket. I'm going to first add this, which I consider the final orbit stage. All we need now is to get this, is to add a stage that'll get us into orbit. Okay, so someone complained last time that I was not using the orange tanks. Instead, I used 4 of these tanks instead of 2 of the orange tanks. And the reason is I don't like the orange tanks when they're stacked up. Mainly because the shuttle used the orange tanks and it was a single tank. I was just to supply fuel to the rockets of the shuttle itself. So what I'm going to do now is use the orange tanks because I don't like them. Okay, if we stack these up, I could use the larger rocket engines on this, but I'm not particularly a fan of using larger rockets than required. These builds. However, it would actually look better if I add a fairing to this now. It'll bulge out and look huge and weird with a small rocket underneath. So in fact, that's what we will do. But first off, we need to get our decoupler back. We then need a fairing. And in fact, that fairing is not big enough. Okay, so we'll use a larger fairing. Will encompass the entire rocket. And now we'll add the large rockets themselves. So where's the Kerbal tanks? Yes, here we are. Now that looks much better than using the smaller rockets. However, you'll notice that the size difference does not look so good there. But however, other than not looking so good, it does not allow for stability. In fact, I've had rockets which are wobbled out of control and to destruction. So I suggest adding again some more struts that'll enable the stability of the rocket to hold it together. Now let's build a booster stage that'll get us into space. We're getting close, 3,800, we need over 4,000. But now let's add some booster engines on the outside. And I'm going to change symmetry to 2. And what we'll test to see if 2 rockets at the moment will give us enough to get into space. By the way, using liquid fuel engines on the outside is more efficient than using solid rocket boosters. Let's add some struts to that. And now let's add some rocket engines. I suggest using the LVT30 engines, not the T45, because you do not need steering on these as it is. Now let's add the fuel duct. normally it's best to add the fuel deck to the bottom engine, tank to the bottom tank. That way, the fuel goes to the bottom and not to the top, causing instability in the weight of the rocket being on the top, which could cause your rocket to flip as it's going through the atmosphere. Okay, let's do some staging corrections and observe on how much delta V we have. 4003. Okay, so we're close. Let's add a little extra. In fact, let's add a little aerodynamic stability. There we go. Now hold over the radial decoupler, hold Alt down, click, and you've copied the part. Now what we will do is we'll duct the fuel from there to there. I'll leave that to the center tank. All we have to do now is restage it, so that we'll have to decouple first. Hey presto, we've got our asparagus staging. And now we've got 4,174 meters per second for our getting into orbit stage. And that is enough, that's all you need. All we need to do is add a little stability for when going through the atmosphere. I suggest using winglets. If you're using a larger rocket, I've tended to go for, if I can find it, all delta wing notes now. If I can find it, as I say, and I cannot find it, am I blind? I'm sure it's part of the game, the stock game, unless it's part of mod. There we are, the Deluxe Delta Winglet. Add 4 of them to the rocket. That'll enable control. And also if you find that you have lack of control, what you can do, especially with the large rockets, is add a large inline reaction module. So what we'll do, we'll quickly add that in there. Yes, and you have to rebuild your fairing. But that should be easy enough. Okay, then we're done. Except for launch clamps. Get that part, put it over here to make sure we're all nice and stable. And we are done. Now I'm going to go and do this, do the launch and rendezvous in fast forward video. If you're wondering how to do that, the first 2 tutorials of the building a space station cover that. I've done it twice to make sure that all my bases, all my asteroid bases are covered. But this should easily enough get into orbit. So I will see you when we get to the asteroid. Okay, so now that we have arrived at the asteroid, it is time to go and dock this. Right, first things first, hopefully you've killed your velocity in relation to the asteroid for the target. So what I want to do is point towards the asteroid and thrust towards it. At this point you can use your RCF thrusters rather than using the engine and risking ploughing your miner into the asteroid. And also do note that if you have targeted the asteroid, it may be possible that if you've connected anything to the asteroid itself, when you've targeted it, it's possible that you've targeted the part that you've attached to the asteroid. But there is a trickier way around that, but I'll show you that as we get closer. Okay, at this point, I suggest you arm the claws because you're going to have to use them to attach to the asteroid, and it's not worth doing them too late, otherwise you'll be trying to do several things at once, like arm the claws, control from here, trying to orientate the spacecraft at the last minute. It's best to try and do everything within steps, but within a timely manner as well. And now that we've done that, we can control from one of the claws. There's a button to do that as well, and also then orientate towards the asteroid. And once everything's fine and dandy, now all you have to do is accelerate towards the asteroid, and then we can attach the claws. Also, I suppose it's best to mention at this moment that you can use the I, J, and L keys to translate your rocket, or you can use the docking modes as such. That'll change the WASD keys to the same translation keys. However, I prefer to use the I, J, and L keys. That way you've got the WASD keys to orientate your spacecraft at the same time. But it's more your preference. You may have noticed that I've gone to the other side of the asteroid, and the reason for this is because the design of this, that there's 4 claws, that we need some kind of smooth surface to attach it to. Now the other side of the asteroid is quite lumpy, but this side has some smooth areas, such as the area above the solar panels. So as we orientate this, and we can then translate towards that spot up there using the IJ and L keys or the WASD keys, depending on your preference, as I just mentioned. But the trick is here, we have the probe core of one of those asteroid thruster blocks targeted. Now, there is a way to overcome that. In fact, if you right click on the asteroid itself, you should have a button saying target center of mass, and if you click on that, it'll target the center of mass of the asteroid itself. Therefore, you no longer have the marker pointing at the probe, but you have the marker pointing to the center of the asteroid itself. And that's handy because you can use that as a reference just in case you lose your positioning. Now hopefully at this point you've learned how to use the translation keys to get your ship into the correct position. I have to note that this is more by eye than using an apple or any other tools in that matter. So what we're going to do here is trying to orientate the spacecraft in the right direction, try to get our sideways velocity, and just head forward slowly. Now use the side camera and from 2 angles, from the top and the side, and try to judge it as best you can, pointing up and down, left, right, and you should get roughly what you require. But note that you'll probably only get one of these claws to attach. And doing this post commentary, I know that only one of the claws attach first. However, the claws have a handy function, which is the pivot function, which I will show you in a moment. And last adjustments, and we have attached. Okay, now that we've attached, we can see that only one of the claws have attached. That one's not attached. If I can click it, that one's attached. You can see it's got the release button on it, but none of the other claws are attached. So what you can do is click on the free pivot button, and that allow you to rotate the craft in relation to the attached claw. That way you can at least get one more claw attached. So if we try to rotate it, turn the RCS off so it doesn't affect the RCS on the asteroid itself as well. And I think we have another one attached. Yes. Now I free the pivot of that one, but I tried to get the others attached, but it's no use. They don't get any closer. So unfortunately, perhaps in hindsight, we should have only attached 2 claws to this. Well, the design was cool, so I'm going to say it was worth it in the end. Anyway, now what we can do is the mining. Now hopefully the drills will reach the ground, the surface of the asteroid, so what we'll do is orientate the camera, use the middle mouse button to orientate the camera, and you can zoom, you can orientate the camera in any direction. Okay, so now let's right click on the drill, deploy. Obviously this one's going to hit into the surface. I'm not sure about this one. Yeah, that one, it gets into the surface. Let's try this one. It looks like it is, but I don't think that one did impact the surface. And this one obviously as well will impact the surface. So what we can do now that is done, we can start the mining of the ore, harvesting all the ore, glorious ore within this asteroid. Let's try that one, just in case, but it's not impacting the surface, so it's not worth it. Okay, so now that that's all done, all we have to do now is wait for that ore to be filled up. And if you look at that trail, it's leaving a trail coming from the asteroid. Now, I'm not sure if that's a glitch, but you can just about see it. I'm not sure if you can on YouTube, but you can see the puffs of smoke coming from the drills. Now, I thought that was wonderful. It was like as if it's a comet traveling through space around Kerbal. But on another note, talking about the mining, let's get rid of this Kerbal engine redux mod. Now, we have one engineer, which is Bill Kerman. And why are you telling me this? You're saying, well, if you have an engineer on a drilling rig, that increases the amount of ore collection you get. And yes, this is when I noticed that this drill is not working. So let's undeploy that one. But with an engineer on board of the craft, you can mine more ore percentage than you can without an engineer. So that's a handy note. If you're going to do a drilling rig, make sure you pack an engineer with you. Okay, that's done. All we need to do now is try to transfer that ore into that liquid fuel. As you can see by here, we have enough room in these tanks to store some fuel. So if we start the processing of liquid fuel and oxidiser, we can increase the amount of fuel we have in these. And if we have a look at the RCS control tanks, we are getting fuel. By the way, these RCS thruster blocks, they're not actually using RCS, they're using liquid fuel and oxidiser, but they're using the vanilla engines which use only liquid fuel and oxidiser. So the processing of the ore is complete, it is working. We have a tank to store the fuel, we have everything we need for our mining operation. So this leads me to the next point. What do you want me to add to this asteroid next? Some of you suggested habitat zone, habitats for the Kerbals. Some of you suggested docking ports for space planes. Someone even suggested traveling through the Kerbal solar system. So let me know in the comments below what you want next, and I will try to do so. Other than that, all I can say is, I'm Orbiter. Trust me, I'm an engineer.